Hi, welcome to my channel. Canada just received a large shipment of Chinese SKS. And before you rush out there and buy one, there are things that you need to know about the Chinese SKS. First of all, China has been producing SKS longer than any other country in the world, and it was reported that they made about 10 million of them. And they have a lot of variations within the standard SKS. Not to even mention about the variants. The variants, they have like over 2 to 3 dozens of them, and that would take about 2-3 other video to cover them all. So I would say that to know more about the variants within the standard SKS, we need to look at the history of the Chinese SKS. And the reason why I have this Russian SKS here is because this was made in the Tula factory in Russia. And when Russia decided not to make them anymore, they closed down the factory for the SKS and they shipped the parts and the machinery, some of the machinery and the tooling and some advisors to the city of Chongqing in near central China, okay, to a factory named Jianxi. I'm sure I'm pronouncing this wrong, but I'll type the name in the video, okay, which also happened to be known as Factory 26. And the reason why I have this here under Russian supervision and using Russian parts, they probably made the first Chinese SKS, which is also better known as Sino-Soviet SKS, very similar to the Russian, except obviously for the wood, because they're in central China and they don't have any Arctic birch. So they use the whatever local wood that they have, and it just happened to be Kapalta. And of course, I'm also probably pronouncing that wrong, so I'm going to type that in also. And they also use lighter color and none of this blotchy, dark red, dark brown color. So in 1956, China adopted the SKS, so they called it Type 56 carbine. At the same time, they also adopted Type 56 rifle, which happens to be the AK-47. Okay. Now it's kind of weird that they call it a rifle, but they were only issued to officers, which use them like an SMG. Okay. Majority of the troops was using SKS. Now, so under Russian supervision, using Russian parts, they probably used it till it ran out, and so the serial number was very similar to the Russian. The Russian used 2 Cyrillic letters and like 4 digits numbers. Under Russian supervision, they use letters, like 1 letter, like an M, and 4 digits. And even at some times, I have seen they use weird symbols. It's not even Chinese. It's whatever symbols they just happen to be finding, and they punch that in. Okay. Once the Russian left China and left it for the Chinese to build their own SKS, they started switching from the letter and 4-digit number to all digits, all numbers, up to about 6. Okay, so that went on for the first and second year, and then the third year they started with 2 million. Okay, so only at Factory 26 could you date a Chinese SKS. All the other ones, standard SKS, you cannot. Okay, you cannot date a Chinese SKS. This rule that I'm telling you just applied to Factory 26. So there's two ways to calculate the date, and one is from John Yoper SKS website, and the other one's Weebly SKS. I read both of them. I like both of them, but they're about 1 year off. Okay, but I tend to follow the John Yoper SKS website, and his, if you check the picture, it works on millions. Okay, so if a type 56 from Factory 26 has a serial number that, let's say, in the 10 millions, okay, then you would add the 10 million to 1956, so you would end up in 1966. Okay, so, or if you had a rifle that had 24 million, then you would add 24 million to 1956, it would work out to 1980. 1980 was the last year of production for Factory 26. Okay. Now, even within Factory 26, there was a lot of little variations. And that was because from 1956, they built their SKS like the Russians, right up to, I would say, 1964 or 65, okay, when the serial number is 9 million. Sometime in the middle of the year, they decide to make some changes. And the reason why is because at the time, the American was escalating the Vietnam War. And they kind of felt threatened, and they kind of felt that the war might spill into China, so they started building bigger armies. And on top of that, the VC, Viet Cong, who are South Vietnamese, but fighting to unite the two countries, wanted the SKS, although they were given Type 63, but which, by the way, looked like an SKS, but it had a gas regulator, it had a detachable mag, 20 rounds mag, it also had a rotating bolt, and it's a selective fire. But the VC said, no thanks, we want our guys to be using semi-auto. And so in 1965, that's when the Chinese decided they need to make more SKS. So they opened up all these little factories all over China, and they spread them all around. So if there was an attack, they would not lose if it was a big factory like Factory 26, they would have lost it if it was bombed. So they decided to build all little ones, and they're all over the place, and to build SKS. Now, it's hard to know how many little factories that was open, but they're like in excess of 100 factory codes, right? So it's kind of hard to know for sure how many little factories that was opened up. But they're all starting to make SKS for themselves. Actually, most of the ones that they shipped to Vietnam, to the VC, was from Factory 26. And the reason why I know that is because when the American soldiers brought the SKS back, which is called bringbacks, to the States as a war souvenir, they were mostly Chinese, and they were mostly from Factory 26. Okay, and so therefore, the Chinese gave all the ones that was in storage made in Factory 26 to Vietnam, and they kept the one that was built in the smaller factories for themselves. Now let's talk about the at Factory 26 when they start making changes, because now they're gonna start producing SKS for themselves, but they also got to produce it for other countries. And so they decided to make it faster, make it cheaper, because they found out that the Russian SKS was not a cheap rifle to produce, right? And so they started embarking on a how to make the SKS cheaper. And of course, I already mentioned the first one. I don't know if it's a VC initiated or they figured out on their own that they're going to change the bayonet, okay, from a blade to a spike. Now it's cheaper to make a spike because it's just made from a rod. And the Chinese bayonet is a 3-rib. As you can see, there's 3 ribs on this thing. And it's about 3 inches longer than the blade. Remember, the original Chinese would be the same length blade as the Russian. And so it was cheaper to make. Now also, the VC preferred the spike is because they used it as a monopod. They would stick this on a piece of wood, and then they would go sniping at their enemies. Okay. So, also in 1965, at Factory 26, they start to make some changes. Now, with the Russians, the variations of Russians within the standard, you can actually tell from the gas block. Okay, the first gas block that came in 1949 to early 1950 was squared off. Okay, that we call that an early production. Okay, and from early 1950 to part of 1952, it became angled. And this is what an angle gas block looks like. Okay, and then from part of 1952 to the end of Tula, it was a curve gas block, which of course the Chinese picked up after that. So the Russians had early, mid, and late production. The Chinese gas block stayed the same throughout the whole entire production, but they also had early, mid, and late production, and you can tell from their barrel lug. The early production is exactly like the Russian long barrel lug, like this one. And the barrel lug looks to me about 1 1/4 inch long. And then in 1965, when they also changed the bayonet, they also changed it to short barrel lug. And this looks to be about 5/8 to 3/4 inch. Of course, it's lighter and possibly a little cheaper to make. Okay. And this barrel lug continued at Factory 26 right to closure in 1980. However, in the 70s, sometime in the 70s, other factories in China started to make pin barrels, barrels that are pinned. There's no barrel lugs at all. Okay, they were just a barrel, and they heated the receiver and pressed it in and pinned it. Now, obviously, that was a major step because it was a lot cheaper, because the barrel blank was a lot skinnier than when you include the barrel lug. But Factory 26 never pinned a barrel. Okay, other factories did, but also other factories also made barrel lugs too. So I don't exactly know who did and who didn't. All I know is that Factory 26 never pinned the barrel. They used to have the rear swivel on the side, and they just switched it from the side here. Okay, they used to swing it on the back of their on their backs, you know, like as if they were a cavalry or something like that. And then in '66 they just switched that down to the bottom, like the Russian. The Russians is at the bottom. Okay, so now instead of the backs, they just sling it over the shoulder, like the Russian did. So that was a change made in 1966, and then in 1967, okay, the gas tube. As you can see, the original Chinese one was similar to the Russians. This is one-piece gas tube. And here is a 2-piece gas tube. So it was easier to make a 2-piece than a 1-piece, I presume. So that came in 1967. Also, the lightning cut that was Originally, in the Chinese also, the lightning cut, they decided, you know what, the savings of the little extra weight was not even worth milling that out. So the carrier had no lightning cut. What else do I see here? Also on the recoil guide, they used to have the locking cap milled out, but now it's just a stamp. And I think that's basically some of the changes already. So if another major change came in 1967, I believe. The milled FCG, and now they switched to a stamp. Okay, so they don't need a machinist to make that. This is all stamped and spot welded, as you can tell. Okay, so having gone through all these changes, so what does this mean to the latest shipment that just arrived? I am back. Now enough of the history lessons. How do we apply what we learned to the new shipment? So far, there's only pictures of one rifle that's floating around on the forum and on a particular dealer website. And this is the rifle. Obviously, it's their best and brightest one that they posted. This one in particular has a unusual top handguard. It's some call it a bakelite, and in the States the American nickname it as French Tickler. I think you can figure that out, what that means. Comes at a spike, bail, and it is obviously from Factory 26. Serial number in the 23 million. I cut off the rest, and the Factory 26 is in the triangle. The triangle stands for basically made for the military, followed by 3 Chinese letters, and it stands for Type 56 carbine. Okay, and this dealer says all hand-picked models instead of random pick and condition. These SKS are all been hand-picked to ensure no big cracked stock, function, and complete rifle condition are in decent shape. Okay. Also below that it says produced in the late 90s. All in mint condition, matching serial number. Well, matching serial number is good. In mint condition. Okay. So, and then below that, there's a note. And the note says, this is a surplus rifle, not brand new. Stock may be pitted, painted, paint will be discolored or faded. Metal may have minor rust and pitting. Now, this note may be just a disclaimer that they put on all surplus. These, this new shipment is surplus and not brand new. So I think I'm not too concerned with being pitted and paint discoloring and faded. That I think will depend on the price. It says very limited supply. I know it's a fairly big shipment, so I think when they say very limited supply, they're talking about the hand-picked. Okay, and then they go about telling a little bit more about the rifle itself. Chrome-lined bore, milled receiver, threaded barrel, milled parts, and folding bayonet. Let's see. Oh, and then they said these early rifles. I thought, didn't they say it was made in the 90s? Well, it can't be early and 90s at the same time. Anyway, they said these early rifles were used and show wear from active military service with a little metal bluing finish and rough wood stock. heavily preserved in Cosmo. Actual firearm may vary. So I think that this last couple of pages are more like disclaimer. So anyway, so let's go and apply what we have learned from the history I just gave you to this rifle. And is this rifle, the list price MSRP is $550 Canadian. Now, to us Canadian, it's rather high. To Americans, they would kill for it. Matter of fact, I can hear some Americans viewers are saying I'll take a dozen of them because in the States, the Chinese SKS has been banned since 1994, and they sell for far more than 550 Canadian. Okay, so in any case, let's see. They already told us that the serial number is 23. So if you add 1956 to the serial number, it comes up to 1979. So this was made 1 year before the factory closure. Okay, so in other words, this is a mid-model, middle production. So therefore, middle production, we would expect spike, and it does have spike. Remember, early was the blade bill, and mid and late production had spike. So we expect spike, and that is in fact true. It is spike. Now it's hard to tell, but the barrel lug, because it's mid production, I would also expect the barrel lug to be a short barrel lug and not a pin barrel. Well, first of all, Factory 26 never made pin barrels, so therefore it has to be short barrel lug, and it can't be long because it's made in 1979. Okay. Also in 1979, I would expect the FCG, the trigger housing, to be stamped, and it is in fact stamped. That's correct. Okay. And what else? Oh, I can also tell that late model, the mid model, the gas tube would be two-piece, and in fact I can see that is a two-piece. So far, everything is going according to what we learned. And what we can't, and also here it is. Remember, mid-production also had no lightning cuts on the carrier, and there is no lightning cut there. And I bet you if I took a look at the recoil, it would be a stamp locking plate instead of a mill locking plate. And also, if you remember, I said the stock was moved, the swivel was moved from the side to the bottom sometime in 1966. So that seemed to be correct. Now that doesn't always mean that it's going to be true with other factories. Other factories continue to make them with the swivel on the side, and so therefore that is not always correct. But so far, what we learned did apply to this one and only picture. Now, remember that ad said it was made in the 90s. So therefore, but this was made in the picture of this one was made in 1979. So in other words, the other rifles in the shipment is even newly made. And obviously we know from Factory 26, they stopped making SKS in 1980. So the other ones are made in other factories. And the other factories, well, it's, the quality is hard to, obviously is not going to be as good as Factory 26, which was made on Russian machinery, Russian tooling, and And because some of these factories are small, quality control is not very good, so we really don't know what we're getting. So therefore, would I buy this one for $5.50? Yes, I would. And simply because, first of all, it's from Factory 26. Also, the condition looks excellent to me. Plus, that French Tickler top handguard is worth minimum $50 just by itself. So yes, for $550, if I were to buy this rifle, I would. Okay, so therefore, but I also know that since these are surplus, others might be made in a factory that doesn't have a really good quality control. So would I be afraid to be buying this sight unseen on the online? Yes, I would not buy other ones without actually physically checking it and applying to what I've learned to the rifles I'll be buying. So knowing that and knowing other ones that's not going to be as good as this one is $550. So what's the mid-range would be? Probably $500. And the bottom of the it could be the bottom, ones that's badly beaten up, that could be anywhere from $400 to $450. Now that sounds reasonable, okay? But if they want to charge us $550 across the board, no, that's way too expensive. Because right now, I can actually buy a nice Russian all matching for $550 Canadian, So, and non-matching, I can get one for $500. So why would I buy, and I know those are made like Tula machinery, so why would I buy the Chinese one if they were badly beaten? So that's basically about it. So have some fun with your SKS, and thank you for joining me. I hope you learned something. Please hit the like button, and please subscribe. Thank you.